Miscommunication occurs a lot in software development. A lot of it occurs because of the varying levels of knowledge, of technical knowledge about what's going on. Developers understand a very high level of detail about the software they're working on, whereas the sales team may understand very little about the inner workings of it. And it can lead to a lot of missed expectations. A specific example that I can think of is a time near the end of the year, this last year, where the CEO came by my desk and said, "Oh, I hear you have these cool ideas you're working on. You've had these brainstorms. I want to see what you're working on." So I sat down with him and walked him through sort of these loose designs and whiteboarding session we'd done on some new features for our software. To him, looking through those, that meant that they were being worked on and soon to be delivered. And despite trying to couch that in reassurances that this was a very early stage, that we were still, trying to figure this all out, we didn't have a solid solution yet, his mind went straight to it was being developed. And, come our 2017 strategy planning meetings, he asked in the middle of that meeting, Ryan's stuff, where's Ryan's stuff? That's probably being delivered in the first quarter, right? And it's like, oh, no, it's nowhere. It was not even began working on yet. But it becomes really difficult to manage those expectations, especially when we're working with clients, with upper management, with sales teams. They get very excited about the broad strokes of what's coming up soon. And they very much want to drive towards like, now, I want it now.
There were a lot of false promises. Like the client would say, okay, I need this all back by Friday because I'm going to be out next Monday, Wednesday. And our contact would say, yep, great, sure, no problem. And then wouldn't follow through and wouldn't do it. So it wasn't necessarily miscommunication as much as it was, I think it was a misunderstanding of when the client says a due date, they're not that relaxed about that. They mean that. They're waiting for it on that day. You need it that day. There's not leeway there. So I think that was the challenge, right? Like we had to make sure that person in particular really understood that when you put forth due dates, you're committing to them, and you're committing to them not for yourself, but on behalf of our organization. And it's critical that you stick to them. And if you can't, don't commit to them. Say, I'll get back to you when I know. I'm thinking around this time, and get back.
One of my people was using instant messages to communicate with somebody else in a different office at my firm. And I honestly didn't see what happened because I was driving here, but she asked him, you need to be on this call. You're going to be on this call, right? And he said, yes. And then she said, are you on the call? And he said, yes. And then when the call was over, she said, how was the call? And he said, what call? And so this is being told to me over the phone. So it has to be more complicated than that. So there was some miscommunication between them on instant messages, and I don't know what that miscommunication was. I don't know what it was, but basically nobody was on the call. So we went in at our max liability. So I was telling her, write an email to the lead manager and explain to them that we had a miscommunication, and really we need to have liability of $1 million, no more than $1 million. And because this particular lead manager is cool, I'm sure he's going to do that for us, even if it's theoretically after the fact. But a lot of managers don't. They wouldn't have to do that, If you missed the call, you missed it, and you get the default, So there was a miscommunication there, and I don't know exactly what it was. When this happens, I would absolutely say it's correlated with when I'm in a hurry. When I'm in a hurry typing something and sending it off, there's definitely a higher probability that it's going to be misconstrued.
I was part of a pretty bad miscommunication at one point where we wrote an email to a customer. Well, I was told to write an email to a customer about a pretty sensitive topic, and was told, really instructed in the position that I was in, instructed to put a very direct and prescriptive tone to it. And the recipient, did not appreciate the tone, nor thought that it was correct. Apparently it had also been discussed before, and felt that email, even on top of everything else, how could you do that by email? And the people CC'd on the email he deemed to be also the wrong people. And so it was just like wrong on so many levels. It's like, what you said, how you said it, the tone, and the people that you included. I mean, there's obviously situations when someone is just misunderstood, right? There's situations where maybe somebody gets offended, perhaps, and it wasn't intended that way. Or just when people say something that maybe they believe is true, but in the setting, it was not the right thing to say. I have a feeling that I need to make sure that my tone is not misunderstood, that I don't seem too aggressive, too prescriptive. I do a lot of, if everyone agrees, blah, 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 which I don't even know if it's good or bad. I just know that I do it. And I think that it is in some ways informed by experiences I've had. I was in a meeting recently, and we have a whiteboard a lot. So often, like, you know, you're using it as a medium to kind of, people are talking about things, but you're trying to almost like illustrate what they're talking about and put a structure around it so you can react to it better. And I start whiteboarding this thing, and then male colleague gets up and he's like, this is how we can do it. And he literally starts recreating what I had just done. And somebody actually pointed out, it's like, John, I think she's just, he doesn't even listen. And he just goes on. He basically repeats, and it's amazing because you can see it on one side of the blackboard, whiteboard and the other, and it's identical. I was joking, you know, it's a little known fact. When women whiteboard, it's invisible to men because it's done a different frequency. Like,
you know, I primarily deal in email, and the CEO of the company is very fond of writing his entire email in the subject line of the email, so that when it comes in, there's no body and it's just a long subject line that you have to read. In the sort of like early days of the iPhone, you'd lose it, you know, because it wouldn't fit or whatever, or it'd sort of like just go off the screen. So I'm used to people that communicate poorly, and I have adjusted for that. You know, the way that I've sort of dealt with it is like dancing with someone. You have to communicate with them on their own level. Now, I'm not going to write my emails to my CEO completely in the subject line just because he does. But I think that's the best way to deal with what could be misconstrued as miscommunication or bad communication, whatever, is, I guess it's listening, starting with listening. And whatever that means, you know, you receive a communication, reading it, seeing what their perspective is, and then at least trying to match them.
They happen quite often. It's sort of an ongoing thing, and I've figured out that generally the best way to cut things off is to pick up the phone. Sometimes in my line of work, sometimes people don't want, they're deliberately obfuscating or generally just trying not to be cooperative but make it look like they're being cooperative. So you'll ask a follow-up question to something, you know, hey, I didn't understand what that other expense line was, and get an answer back that doesn't really give you anything, or results in 10 more follow-up questions, and then you ask those, and then you get answers back, and it results in 20 follow-up questions. I've found that it's much, much easier. As soon as that kind of thing starts to happen, just pick up the phone and try to cut it off right then and there. Otherwise, you'll go back and forth, back and forth. You know, to me, if an email chain is more than a few pages long, then somebody probably should have picked up the phone. I've gotten back information or communication that I don't really understand, and the easiest way to try to cut that off is to force the people at the other end into a different medium, and more often than not, that means picking up the phone. There are a lot of people that do not understand how to communicate in writing, and so in those cases, don't try to force it, just switch to something else. I try to be very careful because it is very easy to misunderstand tone, you know, or message in an email. I have had points in my career where with a group of close coworkers where you think you have a good relationship, tried to be funny and had people, you know, try to make accusations like, well, that's not funny, that's offensive. You know, you're being offensive, that kind of thing. And it's normally, those are all sort of politically motivated, you know, I'll call them bogus claims, just part of being part of a large company. But I'd say generally it's easy for that to happen, and that's why I like to stick with sort of a cut and dry, clear, concise, succinct business writing. If there's more that you are trying to communicate, then you need to be doing it through a different medium.